And now, from beyond our dimension, this is the JeffMara podcast. Here's Jeff.
My guest is Zackary Price, ordained minister and clinical chaplain who was involved in a severe automobile accident at the age of 12 that resulted in a transformative near-death experience. Zackary, thank you for joining me today and welcome.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
Well, Zackary, if you don't mind, let's start on the day that you had that accident and go from there.
Okay. Well, I'll start from when I woke up that morning. So I woke up that morning and my mother was taking my sister and I to school. And I won't go into the specifics of why the car accident happened. But we ended up getting into a car accident. And it was me and my sister. My sister was in the passenger seat behind my mom. She was in the back seat, behind my mom. And I was in the passenger seat in the front. I had just turned 12, just a couple of weeks before. And so it was legal in Georgia because a 12-year-old was able to ride in the front. Once they turn 12, you can ride in the front. And at least then that was legal at that point. We got into a car accident, and I remember that everything went black. And I remember this sense of peace. And this, and it was almost beyond black. It was also light. It was, where I was, there was no difference. It was a beauty unlike anything I've ever experienced before in my life. It was a love unlike anything I've ever experienced before in my life. There was no difference between what I was experiencing and myself. There was no difference between noun and verb. There was no difference between subject and object. There was no, and I guess the true word for what my experience was ineffable. There was really no accurate way to describe what I experienced, at least with words. There was nothing that I didn't know, but because I was that knowledge. And it's like, we don't have a word for that in the English language. And it was all extremely long, but extremely short. There's an extremely paradoxical nature to this, to what I experienced. And I woke up a month later. What had happened to me is I had a lacerated liver, a lacerated colon, bilateral pneumothorax, which means both of your lungs collapse. I had a fractured L2 vertebrae. I had a contusion on my prefrontal cortex, which I still have. And I was in a coma for a month. And while I was in the coma, my heart stopped. I actually died in the CT scanner. But I remember in the accident, just everything going blank. And then I remember experience that quintessence of beauty, that the ineffability. And I came out of the coma knowing things I didn't know going in. And those realizations or things that I came out of the coma knowing didn't really become revealed to me until years later, when something in my life triggered it. And it brought, this is what I've been holding on to for so long. And so, yeah. And they gave me about, like I said, they gave me about a 20% chance of survival, with about a 90% chance that if I did come out of the coma that I was in, that I would be in a vegetative state for the rest of my life.
Did you go black before the actual impact of the injury? Like, did you even experience the accident, or do you think you were in that black
I
space
don't, I
beforehand?
remember getting in the car. I remember driving down the road, my mother's speeding, and then I remember, and then it just went black from there. I don't remember the injury happening. To answer your question, I think, yeah, does that answer your question?
Yes. While you were there, did you encounter any beings, or at least presences?
Yes, it was, but it wasn't separate from me. It was, this idea is actually talked about in all the great religious traditions, what I experienced. But the thing is that before I went to what was involved in the car accident, like I'd never gone to church before. I come from a very secular family. There's nothing spiritual about anything we ever did. Um, uh, but and what later on in life, I like when I came out of the coma. I'm going to get back to answer your question, but I kind of want to explain something to kind of color what I'm going to say later
Sure.
on. Um, so after I came out of the coma, I had this experience that I couldn't put into words. There were no words for it, right? So I started going to church after I got home. I'm from the Bible Belt. So I started going to church. I was 12 years old. So, I was impressionable also. And I started going to church after I got home and looking for answers to explain, to put words to what I experienced. But all the answers that they gave me they didn't really match up with my experience. They were based on what someone had read in a book somewhere, or what someone had heard in a lecture, heard from someone else, or something someone had seen in a movie or something. But no one was ever able to tell me what had happened to me based on experience, based on something that I felt to be true. Because everything that all the answers and explanations that people had given me, it just didn't feel right, because it wasn't, first of all, it wasn't logical. And for me, especially at that age and even today, I like for things to make sense to me. Not dismissing other experiences, but for me, I need to be able to understand it, right? And that back then, that was true too. And so after I graduated high school, I went to college and ended up moving up to New York and was studying up there. And I started to encounter Eastern teachings and the traditions such as Hinduism and Buddhism, and the philosophy of Sanatana Dharma, right, which is what Hinduism is based in. And I started to read those philosophies and talk to people who practice them, and it made sense to me. And it's like everything, it felt right, because it was like it was started to explain what I had experienced. And as time went by, I started to see those same ideas they were actually in Christianity, the Bible Belt, which I'd come from, right? They were talking about the same things there. They were just using a different language. For instance, in the biblical tradition, so there's this story of, and it's also in Judaism and Islam as well, the story of Moses, and he encounters the burning bush. Are you familiar with this story?
Yes.
Okay, so Moses encounters the burning bush, right? and the bush tells him, "Go set my people free." And Moses, he says, "Oh, sure, yeah, I will. But who do I say sent me? Who do I say gives the authority for me to do this?" And the bush says, "I am that I am. That is my name now and for all future generations." Right. Now that's from Christian scripture, right? So I find it's interesting to me that every person, no matter who you are, no matter what you believe, no matter what language you speak, we all identify ourselves as I am. In fact, we say the name of God before we even say our own name, right? When we met before the podcast started, I said, "Hi, I'm Zach," right? And so it was this presence, this being is expressing through each individual manifestation of it, and each person, right, or each living organism, right, at one, like it's like there's another example that of the aspen forest. Well, the largest organism on the planet. They've done some studies on this, and it's a grove of aspen trees in Colorado, and so they did some studies on it. And you walk around in the forest, you see, oh, there's a tree, there's a tree, there's a tree. That you see all these different trees. But the research they did on it revealed that they all look like they're separate trees, but in actuality, all these different trees, it's actually only one tree expressing itself in countless different ways at one time. And that is what I realized, what I experienced when I died. That yes, I experienced other, but it was me at the same time. And these other presences that I was experiencing, I understood that I was a different expression of that same presence, that same being, right? And being, linguistically, we look at it and it's it's being, it's a gerund actually, but being is a verb, right? I think before it's a noun, it's a verb. So being is like to be, right? It's a verb, right? So I am a human being, right? I am this being expressing itself through the persona from the ancient Greek, meaning mask, right? Through this being is expressing itself through the persona of Zach, right? And you are this being expressing through the persona of Jeffrey. And so there's this being that binds and penetrates and connects everything in existence. And it is the essence of every person. And to go back to the question that you asked, if I encountered other beings, other presences, yes, I did. But it was hard to distinguish between myself because I didn't come from a religious tradition, so I didn't really have a framework to go by at that point. I just know what I experienced, and that's what I experienced. There was an awareness of all these other presences around me, but there was an understanding beneath all of that it's me. It's and there was no ego involved with it. There was no, like I said, there was no separation.
Would God also be not only us, but everything, all physical matter as well? Did you get any sense of that?
Yes, I did. Hang on just a second. Can I get something? I'd like to share it with you.
Sure.
I actually wrote an article for a magazine or a journal that I write for. And it was just published this month. And it talks about what that question that you just asked me, that idea, right? So I'd like to read a little bit from you to kind of explain or to give you my answer, right?
Okay.
It is called I Am That, a Non-Dual Perspective, okay? So whenever we attend a meditation retreat or take part in a yoga class, it is common to hear the phrases like, I am that, or I am not the body, I'm not the mind, I am the witness consciousness. Although we may intuit these statements to be true, if we are honest with ourselves, for most of us, these words are not a lived reality. This isn't how we normally experience life. In this way, these phrases stand as lofty metaphysical promises that we can only hope to experience one day. Devotees have repeated different versions of these statements for thousands of years, so they must be true, right? If we happen to be one of those seekers who still hasn't experienced the larger reality to which these sayings point, is it at least possible to rationally convince ourselves that they are true in order to help encourage us to keep going? How can this affirmations, I am not the body, I'm not the mind, I am the witness consciousness, or I am that, be demonstrated? We can use the philosophy of non-dualism to answer this question. Contrary to how it first may appear, non-dualism does not deny that we experience separate things in life. Rather, it questions the independent reality of what we experience. The independent reality of what we experience. If we start with the proposition that we are consciousness, then it logically follows that we experience everything in and as consciousness. What non-dualism proposes is that what we experience has no inherent reality of its own apart from our consciousness itself. As an example, the light in your room is different from the microphone that you're speaking into. Now, you can illustrate this by moving to a different room and moving the microphone into a different room and seeing that same microphone in a different light. And you can see, and they're independent from one another. And that can be demonstrated that way. So if two things can be experienced separately, independent from one another, then they are demonstrably two different things. Example, the light and your microphone, right? We can agree they're two different things, right? Okay.
Right.
We can apply the same understanding to the topic of consciousness. Common sense tells us our world is experienced by our consciousness, right? Would you agree to that?
Yes.
But is this world that we experience, is it something other than the experiencing consciousness? If we claim that the world is separate from the experiencing consciousness, can we prove it? We cannot, because to prove it, we will first need to be able to experience the world apart from consciousness. But nothing can be experienced apart from consciousness. Nothing. Because the world, that microphone, your shirt, that background, this room, because the world cannot be experienced apart from consciousness. Instead of saying that my consciousness is witnessing or illuminating a world, it is more accurate to say that the world is within my consciousness. So instead of saying God is in those things, it's more accurate to say those things are within God. Those things, the microphone, the computer, right? It is within consciousness, right? Now, this is also true of the body or the mind. Anytime the body or the mind is experienced, it is experienced within consciousness. Now, from the non-dualist point of view, everything that is experienced within consciousness, not apart from consciousness. Now, all things that are not and or cannot ever be seen separately from each other such as a table and its composite wood, must be connected in some way. The table and the wood must be connected in some way. They are not separate existences. The table and the wood cannot be pulled apart. So the table is the name and the form of the wood. So too, the universe is the name and form of consciousness, the consciousness which you are. And the position I take based on my own experience, based on my near-death experience, is that consciousness alone is appearing as the universe. God, if we want to use that word, is appearing as the universe. Therefore, consciousness, God, is non-dualistic. Just as there is no table apart from the wood it is made of, similarly, there is no universe apart from the consciousness of which it is made.
This experience happened to you when you were 12 years old. Did you really change much as a person at that young age in your life?
Dying and coming back was the worst thing that ever happened to me, but it was also the best because it helped me to become who I am. I think I was going in a completely different direction at that point in my life. I mean, I was a kid, yeah, but my life completely changed at that point. I was adopted by my grandparents, and what happened to me lives with me to this very day. I don't, and like I said, I came from a secular family, and so no one ever talked about or went to church, talked about religious or spiritual topics. Never went to church or anything. And I started because I wanted to look for something deeper in life, and I couldn't really put it into words until I found a language later on in life, in my 20s, to communicate it, right? So, and part of it also that got me into what I'm doing now with my work. So, as I think you mentioned in your intro, like I'm a clinical chaplain by trade. So, for those of your audience who aren't familiar with what a clinical chaplain is, it's a cross between, essentially, the function of it is like a cross between a minister and a therapist. So I work with people who are typically very sick, and I work with their families, or they're sick or dying, and I work with their families. And I talk to the patient about their belief system, whatever that may be, whether they be Christian or Hindu or Muslim or Buddhist or atheist or agnostic. And I help them to use that framework of belief to navigate through their experience of suffering and to establish a life enhancing meaning on the other side of that journey. And every time that I'm finishing up my graduate degree at the moment. So I'll be getting back. I haven't been working as a chaplain for a while now because I've been focusing on my graduate degree. But every time I remember working with people and they were passing, it was almost like I was looking through a window into eternity while I was working with them. And it helped me to see something deeper in myself. And also, a lot of the times when I work with people who are dying, there's almost a sense of deja vu that I experience when I work with these people.
Deja vu in what way?
Like with deja vu, a lot of the times you can't really put it into words. You could say, "Oh, that's familiar. That's familiar. That's and it's almost like you can see a light that's not visible, especially around people that are nearing the end of life. There's almost a light that's not visible that I can almost perceive, and it's a feeling of like, and then when they when they're in the process of passing, it's almost like as they, if you want to use imagery, like physical imagery, it's almost like they're walking through the door into the next realm, right? And as they walk through the door, they open the door. So as they walk through the door, the light that's on the other side kind of spills through, and that's kind of what I experience when it happens.
And you're not really having a shared death experience, but it's almost like you're getting a little glimpse of them crossing over, right?
Yeah, right. And it's and I mentioned, I think I may have mentioned this term earlier, is I think that birth and death are they're mirror images of each other, right? And a lot of the times people have said, they've asked me the question like, aren't you afraid of death? And I'm like, no, I'm looking forward to it. I mean, not in a masochistic kind of way, or that I'm looking to harm myself or anyone else, but that it's like we always look forward to birth, right? Births are always looked forward to, but because we don't understand what death is, we dread it. We think it's the ending of something, but in reality, it's the continuation of something. And the opposite of death is not birth. I mean, the opposite of death is birth. The opposite of death is not life. Life is eternal. Life is eternal, and that's one of the main things that I carried from my near-death experience. Is and that I've finally been able to really put into words is that life is eternal, just like energy. Right? Energy cannot. It's the first law of thermonuclear dynamics. Energy can neither be created nor destroyed. It simply changes form, and it's eternal. And I believe, based on my experience, that everything beautiful that we experience in the world is almost like, and I think love factors into this as well. It's almost like through whatever form we find beauty or relationship where we experience love, or it's almost like at that moment in time, there are chinks in the floor of heaven, and that light is filtering through. And that gives us some sort of respite from a lot of the sufferings and darkness that we can experience in life. And I feel like I'm rambling again now, but this makes me think of, I'd mentioned the types of, or the patients I work with, they're from all backgrounds. And so they're, from all religious traditions and non-traditions, like atheists and agnostics. I don't know if you would be surprised to hear this, but a lot of people are surprised to hear that some of the most spiritual people I have ever met in my life have been atheists and agnostics. Has nothing to do with religion, but it has to do, also religion has everything to do with God, but God has nothing to do with religion. It's and people who have different belief systems, they have different forms, different windows that they experience this reality of eternity for themselves. And the best definition of religion I've ever heard in my life was from John Kabat-Zinn, who was he really brought a lot of meditation into the medical and clinical practice. And his definition is, I'm paraphrasing here, but he said, religion is man's attempt to appreciate and venerate what it means to be alive. And we all have different ways that we use to venerate and appreciate and honor what it means to be alive. And doesn't matter what that form looks like, but it serves the same purpose, to remind us of our true nature, of the reality that's behind the eternal reality that seems to be behind the finite existence of this world.
Earlier, you mentioned that you discovered your revelations from your coma later in life. Can you give us some examples of those?
there was a meditation retreat I went on when I was 22, and it was one of those 10-day Vipassana meditation retreats, which is a Buddhist meditation retreat. And around if you're not familiar with what those retreats are, you there's no talking, there's no communication with anyone, but you sit and you meditate for basically 12, 18 hours a day, and you go to sleep. You don't communicate with anyone, but you sit, you meditate, you sleep, you eat. That's it. And you do that for 10 days. And on about day 7, I had my first experience of something called samadhi. And samadhi is, if you don't know what that term means, it's a Sanskrit word. And it means what's similar to the idea of yoga, which means union or to unite, right? So samadhi is completely the wiping away of there are different versions of samadhi, but basically samadhi in general is the wiping away of the sense of separation in your experience, right? So you experience complete unity. And that was an extremely profound remembrance of what I experienced when I died. That there was a presence there that was not separate from me, and was looking back at me, and was revealing this ineffable beauty. Like I said, I think this is different. I think this near-death experience may be different than a lot you've heard, because there wasn't this any sense of separation, and it was like, this is what I experienced when I died. And then that has happened several times when I've been to sacred places. It's happened. It happened. A glimpse of this light, of this, and these realizations came flooding in. One time, just randomly, when I was at the beach, staring at your background, I was looking at the nighttime sky at a full moon, and it was just like, that was like a moment when that happened as well.
Do you think after your experience, you got any new abilities that you didn't have prior that could be considered to be psychic?
I can't say that I did. I can say that this awareness of this beauty that is behind, and it's also an intuitive sense that is behind everything, became quite pronounced as the years passed. That's a revelation that happened to me. And that the sense of connection I feel that I have with people is more pronounced. I connect with people very easily. I don't know if I would have if this near-death experience wouldn't have happened, but I almost I don't want to say I see people's souls, because that's not necessarily true, but I intuitively feel the essence of what people are, and that helps me to in my line of work as well. I don't know if I necessarily got any fireworks type special abilities or anything. I know a lot of people do, but mine, I feel like I got to glimpse something that was profound, and that everyone has been trying to talk about for thousands and thousands of years, and that a lot of people have experienced themselves. But that reality lives with me to this day. Does that make sense?
Yes.
It's not like I got any particular ability or anything.
Has the memories of the experience faded over time?
No, no. Mm-mm. I will, that some of those memories will come. I'll be looking at sometimes an ugly picture, an ugly situation. And those memories, I don't even know if it's a memory that will come back, but it'll be like that presence is looking back at me through that sense of darkness, or that sense of suffering, or that sense of pain, right? That I may be going through. There'll be an intuitive voice behind myself that's saying, there it is again. That's that light. That's that light again. You got to get back there. You got to help other people get back there. So to answer your question, no, the memories have not faded by any stretch of the imagination. If anything, they've gotten stronger. And as time goes by, I will experience a different dimension of whatever that presence is. I'm starting to get more, I guess maybe it's because I'm older now, I've had more experience, and I'm able to articulate, even though it may seem very vague, in a more coherent manner, what that experience is. And as I said, I had no language to talk about this until just maybe the past decade. And I would just bumble around and say, well, this kind of like this and this, and but the words do not do it justice. And I'm sure that's common with a lot of near-death experiences you've heard. There are no words. There are no words to really describe it. Words limit it. And and so this experience it's really manifesting itself, and these memories are kind of manifesting, the essence of these memories is manifesting themselves in my own life. I guess you could use the word productive way, because it's influencing every part of my life. And like I said, I don't have words for it. It's something you'll see one day. You'll see one day. You'll know what I'm talking about. But I guess another part of the memory, the things that have been revealed to me, is this beauty that I'm now starting to perceive everywhere, and I experience in every relationship. That's another version of love. That is the involuntary connection we all have. We may block at it sometimes, and it may look different in different situations, but it's the same connection, the same essence that binds all of us, and it's the same thing that makes things beautiful. It's the same thing that makes a sunset beautiful. It's what makes a baby glow and is beautiful. It's what makes art beautiful. It's I guess as I'm getting older, it's like I can't help but see this everywhere, and this love also. It's an involuntary thing.
Have you ever asked yourself the question, why me? And if so, have you ever considered that possibly you were supposed to have this NDE, or you chose it pre-birth?
Yes, I do believe. I believe that I chose that, and that in order for me to become, I believe. Okay, I'm going to go off on another tangent to kind of explain, to answer your question, right? One of my favorite words is it's the ancient Greek word entelechy. Have you ever heard of that word before?
I haven't. What was it again?
Entelechy.
Entelechy.
Entelechy, yeah. So it's an ancient Greek word, and to describe what that word means is so you have an acorn and an oak tree, right? The oak tree is the entelechy of the acorn, right? And the entelechy is the most completely realized version of whatever a thing can be, right? So the oak tree, or the acorn is the oak tree, and the oak tree is the acorn. One is just completely realized, and one is potential, right? Each of us is like that. We are born as an acorn, and through our experience of life, we not only the ultimate reality that we are, that we have always been, which is the oak tree, slowly becomes realized through the experience of life. And so it was meant to be, yes. Nothing, there's a phrase that I say a lot, and it's nothing can be that is not. So if something ever is, it must have always been in some way. Right? There's a phrase from A Course in Miracles. I don't know if you're familiar with that text.
Mm-hmm.
Well, in the introduction, it says, part of the introduction says, nothing real can be threatened. Nothing unreal exists. Herein lies the peace of God. That's the crux of the whole course. And so I say this in another way, and this is from another angle, but nothing can be that is not. So if something ever is, if our life ever is, if we ever are now, if we ever have an experience, it must have existed or been written in some part of eternity for us to experience, or it could never have been. I know that seems a bit lofty, but
Well, would that be putting us into a realm where we don't have freedom of choice? Everything is like due to fate?
yes and no. So you have a point A and a point B. You have an infinite way to get from point A to point B. So we can choose how we're going to get there, but I've come to understand that there are given points in our lives that are destined, that are fated to happen, right? That we're going to go through that, right? We come here for, it's a learning experience, right? We come here to grow, to become closer to the source or God, or to deepen in our awareness and our of that reality. There's a story that I've heard. I don't know if you've ever heard this, but it's about a man in a white room. You ever heard this story before?
I haven't.
Okay, so the story goes that there's a man in a white room, and the man he's always existed within the white room. The man he's completely white. His body's white. He's completely white. And the room is completely white as well. The walls are white, the ceiling's white, the floor is white, everything's white. And the man's always existed in the white room. So how does the man know he's in a white room?
Only until he leaves it?
Right. He doesn't know he's in a white room. He has no idea what white is because that's all he's ever known. It's all he's ever known. So in order to appreciate what white is, the beauty, the sanctity, the cleanliness, the holiness of what white represents, everything that is white, he has to experience all the gradations of what white is not. And when he goes back to the white room, he can more deeply appreciate and honor what white is, and everything that entails, right? That all the colors exist within white. But he didn't know that. He didn't know what other colors were. So that's kind of an analogy of to point to an answer to the question you just asked me. Sorry.
I'll rephrase the question to you. Do you think that we reincarnate to Earth over and over again?
Yeah, I do.
Why do we do it?
To become what we are.
Do you think there's an end point to it?
That's to put it into a finite.
I mean, not a complete end point to reincarnation, but an end point to coming here and maybe going somewhere else.
Possibly. I mean, I don't have the answers. I only know what I experienced and what my intuition tells me. Different theologies, different traditions will have different perspectives on that. But yeah, I guess depending on what level of consciousness we have, and how purified. Another one of my favorite words is alembic, right? And alembic is I think it's I think. And what an alembic is it's a purifying vessel for alcohol, right? So an alembic is anything that purifies or distills whatever is being pure, whatever is put into it. So I think that this life is also, each incarnation we have is it serves as an alembic to more purify and more clearly reveal the essence of what we really are, and to more in a deeper way to wipe off the dust off the mirror so that you can see the reflection clearly. And there may be no end to that. I don't know, but I think the reality of the I am presence, this being that is the core of each of us, is that's always there. And maybe if it becomes more clouded again, I don't know, we have to come to another incarnation to clarify it. I don't know.
Do you think there are spirit guides or angels on the other side that are assisting us?
Yes, I do. Yes, I do, because it is us. There is only there is the word spirit. We in so many traditions we use that word, and a lot of people, we have our meanings that we ascribe to it. But I think it's interesting to me because as part of my master's work, I've studied this, and the word spirit, the origin of it is spiritus, which is a Latin. It comes from Latin, and that's the same root from where we get the word to inspire or to expire. So spirit is literally the breath of life, is the essence of life itself. So anything that breathes, by definition, is spirit. It is spiritual, right? Like I said, some of the most spiritual people I've ever met have been atheists and agnostics because they were like environmental activists. They were human rights activists. They didn't believe in a theistic tradition, but they supported what it meant to be alive for them, and they were anything that supports or advocates for life is spiritual. And so to answer your question, yes, that there are spirit guides. There are other parts of the self that we are connected to, just like waves on an ocean. There are countless waves, and they all think that they're separate waves, but they're all water. Each wave is completely water. The ocean is entirely water, and just as the breath, the spirit is the essence of this Zach. Just that same spirit is the essence of Jeffrey. And and I guess this goes down to I just see this connecting every philosophy and religion. There is this one life force. That's what I realize, is that there's this one life force, and it is expressing in every situation, every person. And yes, of course, there are parts of that life force that are what we would call spirit guides. What are angels?
Do you think that God is the universe expressing itself and evolving?
Yes, but evolving isn't becoming something new. Evolving is revealing what has always been. Just like I said, if something ever exists, then it can never not exist.
I don't know how to use the word properly, but when I thought about it, I was like, expressing itself, it's entelechy.
Entelechy, yeah, it is the process of the entelechy. It is the revealing of the wholeness of what one is. That's another word. That's another word I'd like to share with you. I'm all about words, and they help me a lot because I tend to be very cerebral. The word holy, The word holy, a lot of people, when we use it all the time in religious situations and churches and stuff, we use it all the time. But I found that most people don't know where it comes from and what it actually means. The word holy comes from the Old English word halig, Halig. And halig is the same root from where we get the word whole or complete. It's also the same root from where we get the word heal, right? So this wholeness, right, that exists in eternity, we would call that holy, complete, without bounds. It is entire. It is wholeness itself, right? The holy, right? It exists in eternity, right? Which is infinite, right? But if we come into this realm, which is finite, we experience separation. We experience beginnings and endings, and contrasts, right? So another word, the word sin. It's another word people we use a lot, and we don't really understand the origin of it. But it's not actually originally a religious word at all. It was adopted eventually, but it was actually an archery term. And if you sin, if you shoot the arrow and you miss the mark, that's what miss the mark means, right? You miss the bullseye and you've sinned. That's literally what it means. And a lot of times people beat themselves up because they sinned or made a mistake or something. But that's not really a common sense way to handle that. You've missed the bullseye. Okay, go out and pull the arrow out and try again and try again and try again until you get it right. The purpose of the sin has a purpose. It's not to punish us or anything. It's a learning mechanism. So we can, through circular cognition, which is learning in a circular way, right? We can gradually learn how to get the bullseye right, right? And so that mistake, which is really what that is just an error, is we would say that's like a tarnish or something, because we have a judgment that we beat ourselves up with, right? And so if we really believe that, right, that is a type of sickness. It's a type of guilt, shame, and punishment, right? It's a type of discontent, and that is so we would believe that we're sick, or we're engulfed in sin, right? And the results of that. So the process of getting from there back to the state of being whole, that is the process of healing, which comes from the same root of halig and whole, right? So coming from that state of complete separation, which is what we are in now, we go through the process of healing back to a state of complete wholeness. And then in eternity, we experience that as wholeness, as the holy.
If you had a friend whose loved one just crossed over to the other side, what kind of advice would you give?
I would listen to them. I would I don't know if I would give them advice. I would listen to them, because I could tell them words that would make them feel better in the moment, maybe in the moment, but it wouldn't last. So I would tell them, I would, I would ask how I could help, and I would listen to what they're going through. That's actually something that's really kind of an epidemic in today's world. We don't really listen to each other anymore. Oftentimes we don't. And there's a loneliness epidemic in the world, and it's becoming more and more prevalent. And I think part of my job as a chaplain and as a minister as well is to listen to people, to the ministry of presence, being there for them. And as I said, birth, death and sickness, it's almost like a type of birth. And I think it is one of the most sacred things that I've ever experienced in my life. and being with people who are undergoing that transition and their families are is it's sometimes very profound, because it's a type of you really see how much they love that person. And I guess through my interactions with them and my ministering to them and talking with them, spending time with them, I try to help them to see, not necessarily through saying anything to them, but helping them to see that the presence that their loved one still exists right now. And it's going to show up differently for them than it will for me, for you. I mean, it's different for everyone. But there's another analogy. I'm full of analogies that I've used a lot. Is, if you're standing in a church, you're standing in a place that has a stained glass window. You see through the stained glass window, and you see all the blues and the greens and the reds and the yellows and the golds and the browns and whatever colors are up there. You see all these beautiful colors that are coming through, and they all look like they're separate colors. There's these separate lights that are coming through, but it's only because of the sunshine, the light on the other side of that window, then you can see the separation. And so they're caught up oftentimes on that one section of that window. And what I do with my work and talking with them and spending time with them is to try to find a way to see past that one pane of that window, and to witness the light that is on the other side that's coming through, be aware of that. And I lead a lot of meditations. I hold about 4 a week, and especially, and also with when I get back to working in the clinical setting, I'll start working with people one-on-one with meditations. But I guess to answer your question, I've kind of rambled again, but
right.
but to answer your question, I don't think I could say anything to them in a finite way that could help them. I think it's finding where they are in that moment, figuring out what they need, and then helping them to see the truth of what's happening. Could I say one more thing?
Sure.
There's one of my favorite quotes about grief that I've ever heard, and it was from WandaVision on Disney Plus. It's a Marvel show. For those who haven't heard of it, it's based on a comic book, and at the end, I think it's the last episode of the entire series. There's a character that dies, or maybe this is from a movie. I'm not sure, but this character Vision says, "What is grief if not love persevering?" And so that's what I would try to help them to see.
In your job with a terminally ill patient that eventually crosses over, how would you consider that you had a positive outcome with that person? What are the indications or signs or results of being with that person that in your mind equate, okay, I did my job and this was a positive outcome?
You mean short-term or long-term?
Well, I guess it can't be long-term for the patient because he or she crosses over.
So you mean the family, working with the family?
Family and or the patient. Like
and the patient, okay.
Like what reaction from the patient in your mind equates that you had benefited the patient? What are you looking for?
Acceptance.
Acceptance
and peace. And I guess those go hand in hand. And a surrender to what's happening with terminally ill patients, right? A surrender to what's happening. And sometimes there have been healings that have happened because of the surrender.
It's amazing.
Letting go.
Yeah, I hate to interrupt you, but I love that you use that word, because there are times when people have surrendered to death that they have an NDE.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And there's
Yeah.
something in surrendering that's very powerful, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. 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 And so they, surrender. I guess part of my job is to help patients in that area of life. I'm not currently working at the moment. As I said, I'm finishing my master's, and then I'll get back into the clinical setting when I go back, when I'm done, which will be done. It'll all be finished in about a month and a half. But so yeah, surrender. And then as I work with the family, during and after the transition of their loved one, acceptance and integration and finding a new equilibrium, right? There's a phrase that you hear so often, it's finding a new normal. And I guess that's the same thing as finding a new equilibrium, but to, because I believe that each of us are a part of everyone else. Like you and I are a part of one another. Um, our families, we're all a part of one another in some way. And just like I read in the article that I wrote, that I shared with you, it's all happening within this one being, and it's ideas in one mind, in this one consciousness. But we're so caught up in these in our separation from one another that we, that's where fear comes in. And part of what I do is try to erase that fear in some way, and to help the family to find peace and acceptance, and I guess using the word surrender again.
After watching this podcast, people may want to reach out to you and ask you questions. Are you open to that?
Sure, yeah, I'd love to talk to people. Yeah, I talk to a lot of people every week.
What's the best way to contact you?
You can email me at Zackary, that ZACK .David DAVID .Price at iCloud.com.
Zackary, before we finish up, can you leave us with one last positive message?
There is no death. Death is not real. There is only life. We only have awakenings and forgettings and awakenings and rememberings. And our life is the process of our not only remembering who we are and what we are, but it is the process of revealing to ourselves the truth of what we are, that already exists. Everything that we ever will become exists now, and life is the revelation of that truth. That's what I found.
Zackary, thank you for your message, and thank you for being my guest.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for watching the JeffMara podcast. I really appreciate you. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. And if you do, there are loyalty badges and other perks depending on your level of membership. All you need to do is click the join button underneath the video to find out more. Thank you for your support.